The Mobcast Network.
Hey, you're listening to the Bandwagoners. My name is Andy Cole.
And my name's Justin Boniface. We're bringing you news and notes from around the NHL.
How you doing?
Back.
Yeah, you're back. We're back. It's been, when was the last show? We were in June, I think, was it, right? Right after the Blackhawks won the Cup?
That's right.
So we should explain to people what's going on right now. If you guys are wondering why Justin sounds different than me, Justin has moved to Mackenzie, British Columbia, which for those of you that aren't familiar with the geographical location, that's like pretty much in the middle of nowhere.
It's 1,300 kilometers north of Vancouver. We're going to get snow probably in the next couple weeks here, so doing a little small town thing.
How are you liking it up there?
I'm loving it, and I'm stoked for winter. It sounds like there's lots of backyard pond stuff for hockey, and I'm going to do some snowboarding, so I'm pretty excited.
Are you getting the small town vibe from everyone? Are people just insane, like crazy about hockey up there?
Yeah, and everybody knows everybody, so it's like I've started my job already, and know a lot of people already, so that's kind of funny, but tons of hockey fans. I'm in a pool, actually, with about 150 people,
wow.
So that's pretty awesome. But
so that's like the entire population?
Yeah, almost, yeah.
Well, that's amazing, man. I mean, I'm really happy that we can keep the show going. Obviously, we had a lot of fun last year. That was our the lockout season was our debut season, and we had a ton of fun, got a ton of listeners. People seem to really enjoy the show, and through the powers of Skype and technology, we are connecting with everyone again. So it's I'm looking forward to a really good year. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. I'm stoked to be doing the show again, and hopefully we can find some way to maybe improve the audio quality, but this is just kicking it off. So
yeah, absolutely, man. All right, well, how about we do this? Since I can't see you, I can't look at into your eyes and get your body language, so let's just do our very best to feed off each other here and go through the list one by one. We'll give you our predictions of how we think the teams are going to do this year. If there's any interesting stories pertaining to the teams, we can go over those as well. Obviously, the conferences are a bit different this year. They've changed the divisions. There's the Metropolitan Division, or the Metro Division as I like to call it. What are the other divisions called? You got the Atlantic, you got the Central, and the Pacific. So
yep.
Everyone else has pretty much stayed the same. The major differences being Winnipeg is finally in the Western Conference, which is awesome for Winnipeg because they're traveling far less, and the time difference, obviously. Last year, what were they in, like the Southeast Division or something?
That's right. They were in the Southeast with Florida and Tampa Bay, and the other major moves that we finally got that I know some teams were waiting for was Detroit finally going back to the East, and Columbus as well.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a lopsidedness in the sense that there's actually a 7% better chance that the Western teams have of making the playoffs than the Eastern teams do. But hopefully that'll balance out with some teams maybe moving around, i.e. Quebec or Seattle or whatever happens. But it's nice to see that there's less travel time for those teams that just didn't make sense, like Toronto and Detroit being next door and not being in the same conference.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes a lot more sense geographically. As much as I love playing Detroit, I mean, they're always such incredible games whenever we play them. They are a great team, so it's nice that we won't have to deal with them as much. And unfortunately, you guys, we should probably mention this again for the new listeners listening to the show. I'm a big Vancouver Canucks fan, and Justin, who's your team?
The Montreal Canadiens, Andy. I don't think that we're going to have many people who are unfamiliar with that. Hopefully, they can check out some of the old shows too. But yeah, diehard Habs, diehard Canucks. It gets a little bit, butting heads sometimes, but both diehards.
And we're playing you guys coming up soon, I think, sometime this month.
Well, finally we get to see some games against each other, and I mean, even though you're sad about not facing Detroit, you still get to see them because we have a full season.
Yes.
So for those of you who are joining us fresh, as Andy was saying, last year we did get to do our show, but we had planned this in August of 2011 or 2012 or whatever it was, and then we had half a season where we didn't get to do it. We had to wait on the NHL before we could get going. So I'm really excited because we get to do a full season. We get to do 82 games. Mm-hmm. We get to actually see, some teams overachieved last year and underachieved last year due to the fact that, they only had to play 40 or 50 games or whatever it was.
A really condensed schedule. And you weren't traveling back and forth conference to conference, right? The teams were playing just in their own conference last year.
Yeah, that's right. So we didn't get any of the matchups until the Stanley Cup final, which was kind of cool in one sense. But I mean, come on, we want to see more hockey.
Of course. Well, that's probably the greatest thing about this realignment, which in my opinion should have happened years ago, is that my team will play every team this year at home, so we'll get to see every team come through town. Whereas before it was like we'd see the Penguins like once every 2 years, or the Capitals once every 2 years. And I mean, it's awesome for rivalries, for fans of other teams that live in the city that can finally see all these other teams come to town, or in their case, their favorite teams come to town. So it's really bringing a lot of diversity to the league, and it's allowing the fan base to really experience the NHL fully, because you'll be able to see a lot of that talent which you just couldn't have access to before.
Yeah.
So let's go through the lists here and see what we got. So let's do the Atlantic Division first. So in first place right now,
after 4 days.
See how long this lasts. But of course, all my friends who are Leafs fans won't let me forget this. But first place right now, you got the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're off to a 3-0 start. How do you think they'll do this year?
Well, you're making fun of the fact that they're in first, obviously, because who doesn't hate the Leafs? But at the same time, I mean, they are one of the strongest teams in the division when you look at it. I mean, Detroit's getting a bit older, and they do have a lot of talent. But Toronto has played the game of catching up with the teams that have decided to be physical. Yeah. And we've seen the last 3 or 4 years now that's what wins the Stanley Cup, is endurance and physicality and just being able to outmuscle your opponents. So Toronto and Boston, I think, are going to be atop of the Atlantic Division for the majority of the season. And obviously, as a Montreal Canadiens fan, I hope that that's not the case, because those are probably my two most hated teams. But that is the reality of the situation. The Leafs are good.
They are. I'll readily admit that. They are a good team this year, and they were a good team last year. Last year you saw the emergence of Nazem Kadri, and I have every expectation to think that he'll do well again this year. Phil Kessel always consistently gets you 30 goals. I'm sure he'll be great. You got Joffrey Lupul, James Van Riemsdyk. Most importantly, though, is they finally have a goaltender. I mean, say what you will about Reimer. Yes, he's good. I still don't know necessarily if he's your starter. He's the guy you want to have build your team around. In my opinion, Jonathan Bernier is a stud, and he's going to be a star in this league. And the Leafs finally got something they've really lacked since the days of Curtis Joseph, is a really strong goaltender.
Yeah, I mean, they did go through some stints there. I mean, they had Eddie Belfour for a while, and
the Eagle.
No one has really filled the shoes like you said, like Joseph has, and it's nice. I mean, he's still got to be tested, though. He was a backup, and we're going to have to see that. I think actually that might be one of their weak points, but obviously Bernier is excellent, and we've seen now that the NHL is about tandems, so hopefully he can form a good duo with Reimer, and we'll see what happens.
Well, much like Luongo and Schneider dealt with in Vancouver last year, hopefully Reimer and Bernier feed off each other, and knowing that there's an equally or more skilled goaltender backing you up, or playing the other, the 1A and the 1B, hopefully that will make you want to play better as well. So it very much well may be that, for the Leafs anyways, to their advantage, they have two excellent goalies that, especially come playoff time, will really help them along. Second place, you got the Boston Bruins, 2-0 so far. Same old for these guys. I think they're going to once again be a cup contender. Their roster's virtually unchanged from last year. I expect Milan Lucic to have a big year. Marchand's always dangerous. They did get rid of Sagan, which is interesting. But in the place of that, they get...
Oh, come on.
In the place of that, they get Jerome McGinley.
Well, Louis Eriksson is who they got in exchange for Sagan in the Dallas deal, and that's a great pickup. I think he fits right into the lineup and the mentality of the Boston Bruins. But
Eriksson's very underrated. Very
more
underrated.
Of a replacement for Jágr.
Yes.
And that's who they used as their veteran presence in the playoffs last year.
Well, Eriksson is very underrated from a lot of people's perspectives. I think he's a very skilled two-way player that a lot of people seem to forget about, and he's looked really good on the first line so far, and Iginla's slotting in really nicely on the second line, and Iginla looks good so far, I gotta say. Like, he hasn't really shown a lot of age yet. I think he might have a good season.
Well, you got to compare Iginla to Alfredsson in the sense that now the two of them are in a role where all they have to do is worry about their game, and they're not the leader in the dressing room, obviously, like they were. They're still a presence, but it doesn't ride on their shoulders. They're not the star of the city that they're in. They have a new role to play, and it fits more in line with their abilities now. There's less pressure, and they just get to play. And so I think we're going to see great success from Jerome Iginla this season, because he's right where he needs to be.
Yeah, no, I would fully expect Boston to have another very good year, and just like the Maple Leafs, I'm sure the playoffs are a shoo-in for those guys, and I would expect the Bruins to go deep once again. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of them, being a Canucks fan. Obviously, we have our rivalries, but I think the Bruins are going to have an excellent year. And I'm sure you hate for me to say that as well, being a Habs fan.
Yeah, well, like I said, when we started with Toronto, as a Habs fan, there's no way. It's not easy for me to say that. So both of those teams have convinced me that they are huge contenders in our division, and it's going to be tough to make the playoffs. You're going to need 90, 95 points, as we've seen for the past year since the lockout. So.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely, I agree with you. Third place, you got the Red Wings. They're 2-1 so far. The Wings just keep rolling along. Like, we say this every year, oh, they're getting older. But honestly, like, they always seem to balance their youth with their older guys so well that they never seem to miss a beat. Like, they're always a dangerous team. They're a consummate playoff performer. I'm sure once again they'll make the playoffs this year. I'd be very surprised if they didn't. They probably themselves got the biggest offseason acquisition in Daniel Alfredsson, which for a lot of people, that just rocked the hockey world. Like, people were not prepared for Alfredsson to leave the Senators. They thought he would sign one final contract, and that would be it, and he'd retire as a Sen. So picking up Alfredsson for Detroit was a huge acquisition for them.
It does, because the main thing for me is it brings familiarity to the roster, to the Eastern Conference. Because what you're going to have to look at is, I'm going to play the devil's advocate on this and say that Detroit is actually going to be one of the struggling teams in this division. They're not going to be near the bottom like Buffalo, not like Tampa might or Florida might. But you got all three Canadian teams in this division are going to be contenders: Ottawa, Montreal, and Toronto, and they know the division. You got to think that Jimmy Howard has to learn about all of these new shooters that he's never faced. Not only has he not faced them in 2 years, but even when he did face them 2 seasons ago, it was 1 or 2 games, and that was it. He might not have even started if the backup did. So you got to get used to a whole different style of hockey. You've been tossed into this new division. You got a couple preseason games under your belt, and away we go.
But flip side that,
it's going to be a challenge, I think, for the Detroit Red Wings, and it might wear them down over the season.
But you're Mike Babcock right now. Pretend you're Mike Babcock, which means I must be terrified of you because he's scary as all hell. Pretend you're Mike Babcock. Doesn't that equally play an advantage to you in some ways? Because other teams in your division don't know what you're about. Because just like you not having faced them, they haven't faced you either, right? So they got to learn about you as well. So
let me give it to you this way. If you're going to a party, you're with a bunch of people you've never met before, you have to remember 25
Why would I be doing
name,
that?
And those people have to remember one new name. So look at that way for the Detroit Red Wings. You do have an advantage for those games in that scenario, but those other teams are just playing day in and day out against the teams that they have rivalries against. The Detroit Red Wings, every game pretty much is doing research. They're gonna love their road trips out west.
Yeah, and you know that's a very good analogy. I never thought of it like that. Must be showing you how much of a loser I am. I guess I don't go to parties with lots of people that I don't know. Sorry, Mr. Boniface, Mr. Popularity over there. King of Mackenzie.
In a new town too, Andy,
yeah.
So.
They're all secretly Habs fans, and you're just getting along great.
Actually, that is a great thing about the small town. I will add that in is a bunch of diversity. Obviously, I've got a few knuckleheads up here, but other than that, you got Red Wings, Bruins fans, a lot of Original Six stuff going on. I've seen Leafs jerseys, Habs jerseys, so it's really quite cool to be in a mixed city and not have any strong bias one way or the other. It's really neat.
So you're saying the average level of intelligence is a little bit lower then? Is that what you're getting at right now? Or?
Well, so all I'm saying is they cheer for winners, Andy. I'm sorry about your Canucks, and that every time I have to express something good about hockey, you have to take a bitter stab because you're a Canucks fan.
I kid because I love. One thing I will say with the Alfredsson thing, which makes me laugh even more, is Detroit and Ottawa are in the same division. So imagine you're a Sens fan right now. You're still probably absolutely livid that you didn't re-sign Alfie, the face of your franchise, a pillar of the community, and now you're going to be seeing the guy like 10 times a year. Like, this is not boding well if you're a Sens fan right now.
And especially, I mean, when I'm thinking about my playoff predictions here, could you, like, first round, Ottawa, Detroit?
Oh, my God.
Oh, man. So good. So good.
Oh, that would be an absolutely epic match, and we just hope the hockey gods are listening, and they will make that happen, because that would be one hell of a match. I gotta say, you're getting me excited about the playoffs already, and that's like 8 months away.
Like a true hockey fan, Andy.
Oh, you know it. All right, so moving along. Oh, I guess before we should stop, we should also mention that Detroit. I like the signing actually, and he's got 1 goal already. Detroit also picked up Stephen Weiss from Florida, and very very good player, very good second line center. He's a guy that the Canucks were actually coveting for quite a while, and it was thought that Florida was going to re-sign him, and it just didn't end up happening. And he's been really good for them so far as well. So I mean, between Alfredsson and Weiss, is it Weiss?
Weiss.
Bassinger. I think it is Weiss. You're right. For Weiss and Alfredson, I think
He's German, so for sure.
Okay, well, sehr gut. That's a good pickup then for Detroit, and I think those two guys are just only making them stronger. You got young guys like Nyquist really coming into their own. Even without Bruner, I mean, you still obviously got Zetterberg and Datsuk the Magician. So yeah, I think Detroit's gonna have a good year. You're thinking they're maybe gonna struggle a bit. I'm thinking they probably will get a playoff spot pretty easily. But,
I'm thinking a playoff spot, but I wouldn't guarantee it. It's going to be a tough division.
Yeah, no, I agree. That is actually a very tough division. Fourth place right now, they're 1-0-1. The Ottawa Senators, who have a terrific hockey team as well. Obviously, they're coached by the reigning Jack Adams winner, and pretty much the best coach in the league right now, in my opinion. McLean's just terrific. I think Ottawa's got a very strong team even without Alfredson. I think the Ryan signing, getting Bobby Ryan on the same line as Jason Spezza, that's going to be huge for them. That is a great first line. Mikhailic, Spezza, and Ryan is your first line. Terrific pickup for them. Ryan's only, 24, 25. He's a pretty much consistent 30-goal guy. He's been ever since he's been in the league. That's a great first line, and I think they're going to have a really good year as well, and I would definitely pick Ottawa as a playoff team.
All right. What I wanted to add about them actually was Craig Anderson already posting a shutout this year. A very underrated goaltender. I think that he's going to be a big workhorse for them this year. He's going to play a lot of games. They do have Leonard. We'll see how much ice time Leonard gets, but Anderson, look for him to be the Iron Man for that team this year, and he's just phenomenal. Big goalie, plays the net really well. Had more cut off his pads because of how big he is, but because of his size, hopefully that doesn't affect him too much.
Do you feel Ottawa will be a playoff team then?
Yes, for sure. And that's what I was saying again earlier about Detroit struggling is Ottawa, Toronto, and Boston are so good. It really makes it tough for teams like Detroit. Even though they're good, they're older, Ottawa is a grinder team too. They got the physicality. The Senators have, I think, what it takes to earn a playoff spot for sure.
Look for Karlsson to have a really strong year this year as well.
For sure. I mean, he led the league in defenseman scoring last year, so of course, he's going to be a contender.
Yeah, absolutely. Karlsson is probably I would be safe to say the best defenseman in the world right now, one of the top players in the world, and he can carry a team.
Offensively, for sure, I'd agree with you, but I do see a lot of holes in his defensive game. Very valuable on the power play, but on the penalty kill, I do still see him make those rookie mistakes.
He's just so dangerous offensively, though, that so far it hasn't really hurt him. But I do agree. Obviously, he can work on his defensive game. Like a lot of offensive defensemen, obviously, they struggle in their own zone because they spend so much time in the opposition zone. Much like a Paul Coffey, who he's often compared to. Coffey was never the strongest in his own zone, but it didn't really matter just because he put up so many points that they sort of just let it slide. I think Ottawa is going to have a great year. Karlsson is going to really lead them along. And I will say one thing. I am surprised they sent down Mika Zibanejad. I thought they would give him his 9 games. I know a lot of Sens fans were kind of annoyed by that as well. In my opinion, I think he's ready now. I'm not a coach, obviously, so clearly I don't have the knowledge of Paul McLean. But from a fan's perspective, I really see Zibanejad as being ready. I think he could...
Especially with his playoff experience. We've seen the same in the past with players like PK Subban, and once you get some playoff games under your belt, the regular season, not such a big deal, and Zibanejad definitely should have been part of the roster this year. There's a couple players, not with playoff experience, mind you, but a couple players who were left off some rosters, like Jonathan Drouin as well, who I felt just should have had great preseasons and should have been part of the team.
Yeah, so that's a bit surprising, but I still think they'll give him his 9 games. They'll probably bring him up at some point. But, I guess that shows you how deep Ottawa is this year, is they feel they don't need him. And he's a very skilled young man, and he's going to be a very good player for many years. So, moving on, we got 5th place right now in the division. Your boys, they're 1-1 right now. The Montreal Canadiens. What do you feel about these guys this year? Do you think they're a playoff team?
Yeah, depending on if Parros comes back, he's going to be a big part in making us a contender in our division due to the fact that it is such a physical division.
That was brutal to see, I got to say. That was really...
just to have his, right in the first game, and it's kind of ironic, too, because Colton Orr was actually knocked out with a concussion in the last fight that he had with Parros when he was a member of the Florida Panthers. So Parros kind of getting it back on this one, but a weird injury, too, just falling forward, hitting his face on the ice after a little struggle with Ott. So
I gotta say, give me a little rant here. I can't stand the helmet rule, having not being allowed to take off your helmet before a fight. I understand where they're going with it. They want to curb the concussion thing, but I would argue guys are going to get far more injured by punching visors than by slamming their heads on the ice. I mean, how often does that happen? The Parros thing just proves the point, because the guy's helmet's on and he still lands flat in his face. So that rule really did nothing to prevent his injury. It's a freak injury. Obviously, it doesn't happen very often, and you hate to see it, but I gotta say, I think that is one of the stupidest rules I've ever heard. Not being allowed to take your helmet off from fighting.
I'm going to argue with you and say that I like it, actually, because both players can choose to take it together, and then that way it doesn't affect it, and there's still 5-on-5 hockey.
But then you get a penalty.
You get a 2-minute minor each, but if both players agree to do it at the same time, then it doesn't make a difference. Then you get some 4-on-4 hockey or 5-on-5. I can't remember how they do it, but
do you really think that's going to curtail concussions?
Yeah, of course. Oh, yeah, for sure. Especially when you look at the fights in the minors with that kid who actually died because he hit his head on the ice. So what if a player breaks his hand? That's his choice, and he's a fighter. If you punch a helmet and you break your knuckle, no big deal. If you end your career because your life because your
do you really think it happens enough though to warrant that rule? Like, does that happen enough in the league? Like guys getting concussed from fighting?
I think that it happens occasionally, and I think that with the way that they're letting fighting go at this rate, the amount of fights last season that we saw, we didn't even get a full season last year, and the amount of fights that we saw before the face-off, and just for no reason, and 3 or 4 of them in a row, it's going to start happening because they're just letting them go because it's drawing fans in. I think that any of our previous listeners will know that you and I are not a big fan of premeditated fighting in the NHL.
No, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, so I think that the NHL is trying to do what they can to prevent injuries as well as keep fighting in, because we've seen GMs now, 3 of them spoke up as well as a couple others anonymously saying that it's time to do something about fighting. 3
of the more respected ones too. You got Holland, you got Bowman, you got I think it was Boston's guy, Chiarelli, can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, 3 of them.
That's a big statement too, because he's had to beef up his team because of what's been going on in the NHL, and he's on. Let's get more hockey players in. Let's get the fighters out.
And of course, as soon as the Parros injury happens, out comes the ban fighting rule again. I mean, I still think that's ludicrous. Like you can't get rid of that. It's such an integral element of the game. You cannot get rid of fighting, but we both agree, obviously, we've talked about this before, the premeditated, the staged fighting, that's just ludicrous, and that has to go. I mean, there's no room for that in the game. If you want to watch that, go watch the UFC or watch wrestling or something,
Yeah, exactly.
But we're totally... that was
on a side note.
Yeah, that was quite a rant.
But that's just because of Parros there. So we'll have to see how that injury plays out for the Montreal Canadiens this season. But what I do like is their pickup in Daniel Briere, much like an Iginla or a Alfredson. Maybe not as talented or as much of a contributor, but definitely having to take on less of a role. You could make the argument that because Briere is French-Canadian and has wanted to play for the Habs, and the fans have wanted him to play there for so long, that maybe he does have a little more pressure. But that's just Montreal as well as a couple other cities like Toronto. So
he's clutching. He's clutching the playoffs as well, right? I mean,
that's huge. I think we are going to be
great leadership.
Yeah, and leadership in the dressing room, and a great mentor for some small players like Brendan Gallagher.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that. They have a similar playing style, I find. I find Gallagher, there are things in Gallagher that I see in Briere, so it's a good pickup there because I see a lot of similarities between their play styles.
Yeah, I agree completely.
And Gallagher's looked great, I gotta say. He's looked terrific. I haven't seen much of Galchenyuk. He's looked a little invisible, but Gallagher's looked great.
Invisible? Andy, you should look up your stats here. He's got 4 points in 2 games with the Eller and Gallagher line.
That's right, because he assisted on all those Eller goals.
They're one of the highest scoring lines in the NHL.
Well, Eller got the hat-trick on opening night, right? Or was it
not a hat trick? He got
2 points, 2 goals and assist. Right.
He did get a goal in the Philadelphia game.
Oh, that's true. I keep forgetting. Galchenyuk got the second assist on a lot of those, didn't he?
First assist on one and was right through the crease, beauty. But in any case, he's got 4 points in 2 games, and that line's been phenomenal.
Wow. So you think they're going to have a good year this year then?
I think so, because we've turned into a team that's a little bit deeper with the talent. I think because our first line, when Pacioretty gets out of his temporary injury here, Pacioretty, Desharnais, Briere, you got Gionta, Plekanec, and then I can't remember who's on that line with them. And then you have the third line, Eller, Galchenyuk, and Gallagher. So I think because they're such a deep team and our fourth line can keep us physical, Moen, Parros when he comes back, and Prost. So really, I don't see a lot of holes in the lineup. And as we know, the defense is strong as long as Markov can stay healthy. We have Subban and Georges.
And you would hope that Subban follows up his Norris Trophy year as well with another great year.
Yeah, and we can see it. He comes to the table with everything he has. There's a picture on Twitter that Nike threw up asking if PK Subban had taken up football as a linebacker because he put on another 40 pounds or something like that. So more close to Dustin Byfuglien's weight, as I understand it, this season. Definitely taking things more seriously and going to earn himself quite a nice contract. I'm hoping Bergevin resigns him before it's up and free agency people come sniffing.
Yeah, no, for sure. How do you feel?
The only question mark is price. And
I was going to say that. He's been getting lackluster reviews so far.
I'm okay with that because when the expectations are low, all you can do is blow them away. So at this point, we all know what Price is capable of. We just need to see it consistently for an 82-game season. We don't really have a tandem at all, like a lot of other teams are going with. We talked about Vancouver and Toronto, and even teams like St. Louis are doing the tandem thing. So he's got to ride, the 60-plus games this year, and hopefully he can stay consistent enough because Sidney Crosby came out this season and said Carey Price is the toughest goalie in the NHL to score on, and that's
when he's on his game. When he's on his game,
that's right. Well, and he's usually on his game against Crosby because you usually show up for those games against your buddies and your Team Canada teammates and stuff like that. And I just hope we see that consistency from Price. I really that's all that the question mark is because with a healthy roster, I think the Habs have a solid offense and a solid defense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Price is the key, really, for them, I feel. I mean, if they want to go deep in the playoffs, he's got to stand tall. So, and I agree with you. I think very likely that he will, especially with it being an Olympic year. Obviously, he wants that first spot. So, we are 25 minutes in already, and we're only through one conference so far. So let's try and rip through the next few teams that we pretty much are guaranteeing you won't make it. After Montreal, you got Florida. They're not making it.
All you can really look at here is some bright points. Jonathan Huberdeau is going to have a great season, and you're just going to want to watch him.
Barkov's looked good so far.
Talent.
Barkov's looked good. Their first overall this year. He's looked good so far.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay's next. Besides Stamkos and St. Louis, which obviously are still quite dangerous, Tampa doesn't look particularly good. I would be very surprised if they made it, and I'm pretty much guaranteeing you they won't.
Yeah, they've got some work to do. You never know. I think they have a better chance than Florida does, definitely than Buffalo does. But other than that, the top five right now are pretty much the way it's going to stay in this division.
I was really surprised they sent down Druin. I really thought they'd give him his look for 9 games, and that was a bit confusing. I thought, I really thought they'd give him,
especially with the roster that you have. I mean,
why not?
You're not a major playoff contender, and why not bring some young energy to your roster?
Yeah, and it's not like you're that deep that he has to fight for that spot, right? Like he should be able to get some playing time, but. Nevertheless, they send him down. It's very confusing because he's going to be a great player, a really good draft pick for them, I feel. Last place so far, you got the Sabres, who have looked god-awful so far. I would suspect the Sabres to carry over from the previous year, and I would be... Well, I'm guaranteeing it. They're not making the playoffs this year. No matter how good Miller plays, they're not making it this year.
Miller hasn't been himself. I mean, you could put the Olympic argument into play for him as well. Definitely because there's a lot of American contenders this year with Schneider as well. Jonathan Quick, the list goes on. So,
Jimmy Howard,
exactly. So he's got a lot to play against this year, and he wants to start, if not be one of the 3 playing there. So you never know. They don't have a very deep roster, and they're in a tough division. That's why I also agree with you that they won't make it.
No, I mean when your first overall center is Hodgson, you got some problems.
Yeah.
Moving on to the Metro Division now. First place 2-0, the Pittsburgh Penguins. A lot of people are predicting they're going to be Cup finalists again this year. Obviously, they had a really disappointing exit to the Bruins last playoffs, but they're a great team. They're very dangerous still. Their lineup hasn't changed too drastically. I'm guaranteeing they make the playoffs. I'm pretty much guaranteeing they make the conference finals as well.
They're going to win that division for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they're just going to run away with it. They're so much better than everyone else in that division. The only interesting storyline for them right now is obviously at the beginning of the season, the starting job was really up in the air. Was it going to be Vokoun? Was it going to be Fleury? Fleury obviously hasn't really been himself the last few years. He's looked, pretty much god-awful at times. And Vokoun last year played quite well. Very underrated goaltender. He's always been quite strong. Back in his younger days, he was a stalwart in net for the Florida Panthers, just their knight in shining armor. But now Vokoun's out 3 to 6 months with a blood clot out of all kind of injuries. That's sort of bizarre. Injured by a blood clot. That's very strange.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice to see that Fleury is at least able to pick up where we think he should be.
He's looked good so far.
Starting the season with a shutout and 2 wins.
Yeah, he's looked very good. Oh, that behind-the-back save with the glove? Unreal!
So legendary. So that's a big thing that boosts your confidence at the beginning of a season, starting with some epic saves and a shutout. Obviously, when you have a team rostered like the Pittsburgh Penguins have playing in front of you, you have a little bit more advantage in the save percentage category, but obviously Pittsburgh is going to be an excellent contender, and Fleury, I think
if he plays to his potential,
to say pressure doesn't bother me, because the World Juniors we've seen him crumble, some playoffs we've seen him crumble. Obviously that amazing save in Detroit to win the Cup stands out, but since then just kind of felt the pressure too much. So getting just past his prime now, or just into the last couple of years of it, time to show up and say, look, pressure doesn't bother me, let's win another championship.
Yeah, I mean, Fleury's one of those guys that when he's on his game, he's incredible. Like, he's got the skill, everyone knows that. He's a lot like Luongo in some ways. His biggest enemy is himself. Like, he gets down on himself, he lets in one bad goal, and then all of a sudden it's this uphill mental battle for Fleury. So, I mean, if he's able to wrestle his inner demons and re-find his form from a few years ago, Pittsburgh not only now has an incredible offense and incredible defense, they got one of the best goaltenders in the world, if he chooses to be so. So, I think Pittsburgh's going to have a very good year, and I expect them to be Cup finalists again, like they seem to be every year. They're going to have a great season. And Crosby looks out of this world, and I mean, barring any...
It's a big statement when you can say that you have a player on your team that, if he plays 60, 65 games, he'll still win the scoring title.
Yeah, I mean, barring any injuries, and knock on wood, of course, that doesn't happen, Crosby is still the best player in the world. I mean, he's so far above his competition. Nobody can touch the guy when he's on his game. I mean, if he doesn't get injured, I would expect him to be 50 points over the second place point getter in the league. That's how good this guy is. So because of Crosby, expect the Penguins to have a very good year. Moving along, we got the Carolina Hurricanes in second place at 1-0-1. I am not sure what to make of this team. I don't know if I see them making the playoffs, but then again, though, they got a decent roster. They got Semin, they got Solsky, they got the Stahl brothers. Skinner's a year older, and he's going to get better. Cam Ward is always great in net. So
Semin.
Yeah, I said Semin. Yeah, Semin.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, they got a good roster. I don't know if they're a shoo-in to be a playoff contender, but in theory, if all of their guys play to their full potential, then yeah, I would expect them to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I think looking through the division, it's definitely going to be.
It is a weaker division
a little
too.
Bit of a mix-up, but it is a weaker division. Pittsburgh's going to dominate it, and after that, it's a bunch of question marks, especially with New Jersey losing Parise,
Kovalchuk
a while ago. So and Kovalchuk being signed in the KHL, they really are limited on offense. And you keep going down, and teams are different and weak in that division. So I give Carolina a good shot, especially if Cam Ward can play like the year he did. They won the Stanley Cup. You got a solid team there.
It's a good point. I mean, because the division has so many question marks, Carolina could definitely use that to their advantage. So, and obviously they have a pretty good roster. So, I mean, if their guys play to their capabilities, yeah, I think there is a good shot. Without guaranteeing you, I think there is a good shot. That division is still hard to make any guarantees in other than Pittsburgh, though, because you look at who's in last place, Philly and New York. Just like last year, the Rangers and Philly both have the abilities to be playoff contenders. So, I mean, if they find their form, all of a sudden Carolina's struggling. So Carolina has to just take advantage of the fact right now that a bunch of the stronger teams in their division are underperforming and hopefully use that to boost them into a playoff spot. Third place, you got the New York Islanders. They're 1-0-1. I expect them to roll along from last year. They're a year older, probably the best young team in the league, and I'm including the Edmonton Oilers in that. I think the Islanders have an incredibly good team considering their age. John Tavares, I expect to have another great year. He's one of the top 3, top 5 players in the world right now in my mind, and I think
I agree completely with John Tavares being one of the best. And
because of that, I think the Islanders make it. I say the Islanders make the playoffs because of that.
Yeah, hopefully he can lead them to that kind of glory, but I was going to say the same with Carolina as well. I don't think any of the teams from here on out that we're going to talk about in this division
they're not
are
locks.
Going to go deep into playoffs, whether they make them or not, because they don't have the physicality. Yeah. And New York Islanders especially, they're young, and they don't play the nitty-gritty game. They stay away from it completely. And so getting through the regular season, playing a lot of games against their own division, that might get them into the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I think once you hit the postseason, you're going to look for them to struggle right off the bat. So I think they're one of the top 3 teams in that division. But other than that,
yeah, no, they're definitely not a lock to go deep, just like Carolina. I totally agree with you there. I think they'll be pretty much. I'm pretty confident to say they'll make the playoffs, but this division is harder to call. There are no real solid locks. Although I will say, and as much as it pains me to say this, Grabner looks terrific right now. I'm still so choked he's not in a Canucks uniform anymore. I was so mad when we got rid of him 4 years ago or whatever it was now. But Grabner looks great. Nabokov looks very good, very solid so far. So, I mean, I expect him to have another good year. But really, it's all about Tavares. And I think Tavares will solidify them in a playoff spot. But like you said, I wouldn't expect them to go deep. Next, you got the Columbus Blue Jackets. They're 4th place, 1-1-0. I'm not sure what I feel about this team. If Bobrovsky plays like he did last year, then
that's all it's about.
Yeah. I mean, it's all up to him, really. If he plays like he did last year, probably they'll make the playoffs, but I can't guarantee it. I think there still is an outside chance that they do miss it.
Gaborik is really the only offensive weapon that team has, and as we've seen before, his moves can get kind of stale and predictable for defensemen. So
very injury prone as well.
It's got to be Bobrovsky. It's got to be the defense. It's got to be low goals against. It's the only way.
Yeah, I agree. So they're definitely not a lock, but they look like they could be. It's surprising that these guys are in 5th place considering how well Ovechkin's played, but the Washington Capitals are 1-2-0. Ovechkin looks probably...
the scoring title champion?
This is probably the best he's looked in about 4 years. Like, he looks like he is...
He picks up where he left off at the end of last season.
Yes.
He had an incredible last few months leading up to the playoffs, being completely out of contention for the scoring race, and then coming in and being second or winning it. Just incredible. So I think he kind of took that as I can be valuable to my team again. Let's do this. Let's go. And I actually look for them to be quite strong. Hopi is a great goaltender. I think he's very underrated in that division. I'd look for him to stand out as well. I'd say actually Washington has probably got the same chance as Carolina or the Islanders. They're one of the better teams in this division, excluding the Penguins.
Yeah, I would expect from the 2nd place all the way down to 8th place, I expect these teams to move up and down the charts a lot this year. I don't expect Washington to stay as low as 5th place. Sorry, I agree with you. They'll have a good year. I think they're more likely to make the playoffs than some of the other teams in the division, largely due to Ovechkin. The guy is just playing like a man possessed right now. He looks absolutely outstanding. And when you have that supreme talent on your team, regardless of how lacking in depth you are in other areas, I think Ovechkin, much like Tavares on the Islanders, Ovechkin is good enough that he could propel his team into a playoff spot. So I think I give them the nod, and I think they'll be making the playoffs this year. 6th place, you got the New Jersey Devils. We got to say this as a Canucks fan. Obviously, me and everyone else in the world was very surprised when they got Schneider from the Canucks, especially since he's not going to be a starter like he was hoping to be. He's still going to be playing behind Brodeur, who many believe this will be Brodeur's last year. Schneider obviously is going to be their star for years to come. He's an incredible goalie. New Jersey probably has the best 1-2 goaltending tandem in the league right now. I mean, they have 2 incredible goaltenders playing for them. But I don't think that matters. I still think New Jersey misses the playoffs. The Kovalchuk thing was a huge blow to them. They were not prepared for that. They were not expecting him to retire, well, quote-unquote retire, and retire his ass to the KHL. They did not see that coming. When they dealt Parise, they thought Kovalchuk would be their guy. Now he's not. He's gone. New Jersey's got no depth. They got Henrique. That's pretty much it. They got no depth at all. They got no scoring. Their defense questionable. The only thing New Jersey has at all is incredible goaltending, but I don't see New Jersey making the playoffs at all.
Yeah, I agree. They're washed up, done. It's time to rebuild.
Aren't we depressing?
Well, come on now. We've looked at this team as a defensive strategy trap team who refused to adapt when the lockout happened.
Time to rebuild, trade Schneider.
Sorry?
I said time to rebuild, trade Schneider.
Yeah, trade Schneider or build around him.
No, that was a joke. Obviously, they won't do that.
Well, no kidding. But I mean, like, seriously, he is a player you can build around, and there's not a lot of goalies in the NHL you can say that about. That's a big pickup for them, and a great place to start. Brodeur can pass the torch, and they need to do it.
Yep. The Rangers are 7th place right now, 0-1-0. Alain Vigneault has not had a good start with his new team, which I'm sorry to see because I obviously really liked AV a lot, and I'm sad to see him go. I mean, I felt it was time for him to go as a Canucks fan, but I was sad to see him go. The Rangers, again, just like last year, are totally underperforming right now. They got a great team on paper. They should be playing a lot better than they are, especially
it's the syndrome of that team, of that city. Ever since they won the Cup, way back when, they've tried to buy and now trying to do the young thing, and they don't have just the right combo or just the right chemistry or whatever it is. But
you got Lundqvist, you got Nash, you got Richards. Like you think they should be able to pull it together.
I know, but
an amazing defensive corps.
You say Nash, and he's really untested. I mean, he gets to shine in a city like Columbus that was, the Blue Jackets being in last every year. And same with Richards. I mean, an overpriced free agent. That's really what he is.
But then
there's a lot of talent there, but at the same time, he's not your star guy.
But Justin, look at your top 4 defense on that team: McDonough, Girardi, Stahl, Del Zotto. These are 4 of the best young defensemen in the league, and they're all playing.
I completely agree with you.
So what's going on?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. They're cursed. They got this thing going on where they can't get the chemistry down there. These players don't work well together. They all want to be the hero. Nash wants to be the hero. Richards wants to be the hero. It's just it's
not gelling. Could it be a new coach?
You got to play the team game, and I think that Vigneault is not disciplined enough to do it. And I think that Tortorella's message was old. So
maybe
I don't know what you need in that city, but a kick in the butt.
Well, maybe it's just they haven't bought into AV's system yet, or maybe they just are still adapting to it. Like maybe after October, give them a month and they might be ready to go,
Well, it's too early to say that based on the season is where I'm coming out with this, but based on the roster that they were and based on the previous season, I think that, and based on Alain Vigneault, I don't think this combination works. I like Tortorella in Vancouver. I think the reason he didn't work in New York is because his message gets stale kind of pretty quick when you're that aggressive of a coach, but I honestly, Vigneault, I think, has kind of lost his edge as opposed to when he joined the Canucks.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really not sure what the Rangers are going to do this year. Obviously, with the talent that they have, I mean, especially the young guys like Kreider and Stepan. Stepan was awesome. It was great that they signed Stepan because, in my opinion,
I want to be surprised.
Stepan was one of those guys that, like, he's going to be a very good player for a long time. So it was good that they locked him up. Well, at least for a couple more years, anyways. I want to be. I mean, I want the Rangers to make it. I still think, obviously, they have the talent where they can make it. If they really find their form, they could be right up there with Pittsburgh as one of the best teams in that division, but they got to find their form. 8th place now, another team which we're still not figuring out. We still haven't been able to figure out why they're doing so poorly. You got the Philadelphia Flyers, 0-3-0. Granted, they have no goaltending to speak of right now. Their goaltending's quite weak. Still, though, there's enough talent on the Flyers that
when
they
you say LeCavalier and Giroux in the same sentence, let alone the same roster. Come on, like.
Yeah, they should be
a goal-scoring production here.
Look at your top 4 centermen: Giroux, LeCavalier, Schenn, Couturier. How are you not playing better? Voracek, Simmons, Hartnell. Like, this is a very talented roster. One of the most talented the Flyers have had since the Lindros era. How are they in last place? Is it really all to do with the goaltending? I mean, Emery and Mason aren't exactly a great 1-2 punch, but there's enough talent on that team. They should be doing far better than last place.
Yeah, I agree completely. Obviously, it's a little bit early, but they are 0-3, which is kind of scary. I think they will get the ball rolling. I give them better odds than the New York Rangers, but definitely an underperforming roster as of right now. I mean, 3 goals for in 3 games with, as the offensive talent you mentioned, unacceptable pretty much at this level. You got to take advantage of every game, and they just haven't done that.
Yep, totally. We are already 43 minutes in, so what
I was going to say, Andy, what I think we should do is maybe talk about some news from the week and do our preview as a 2-parter. I think that it'll only be 2 weeks in, and we can hit the Central and the Pacific after that. But, there was some exciting stuff in the NHL this week as well that I'd like to cover without, drowning everybody out in a 2-hour show. What do you think?
I agree with you. That's every Sunday night is what we're thinking of doing here. So let's do part 2 next Sunday. That sounds good to me. What do you want to talk about?
Well, number one, Patrick Waugh. I just looked at a poll on TSN.
That was amazing, by the way.
It was spectacular. So for those of you who don't know, Patrick Waugh, the new head coach of the Colorado Avalanche, a major change for them. They had a huge opening. I don't know if you watched the beginning of that game, Andy, but a huge, a hilarious, cheesy, we've changed our philosophy.
No, I didn't see it.
Back the champions. They talked about Tanguay on the lineup, Foote in the management office, Waugh on the bench. So that was
Sakic.
Yeah, exactly, right?
He's not on the ice, but he's in the press box. Wave. Hello.
But I think that the mentality is really at the players right now. I think it's a little bit early that they played amazing in that game, but Patrick Waugh has brought the energy. And what Patrick Waugh did, for those of you who didn't see it, and anybody who's a hockey fan, I would be shocked if you didn't, got into a yelling match with Bruce Boudreau over a hit that I can't remember who it was.
McKinnon.
From the Anaheim Ducks. No, he went to hit McKinnon.
Yeah.
I can't remember who threw the hit.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
knee on knee. And essentially an attempt to injure with 2 minutes to go in a 6-0 or 6-1 game.
McKinnon being the first overall draft pick, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's looked awesome so far.
It has looked spectacular. You see that no-look
oh my God.
pass out to McGinn?
He looks like he's 25 years old out there. He's amazing.
Just playing with such poise and patience, much like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins did in his first season. But an attempt to injure him, and Patrick Waugh standing up for his players and calling Boudreau out, calling the roster out. Got a little bit heated when the stanchion fell over after Waugh pushed it.
That was amazing.
That was so funny, though, and I love it.
I do agree with Boudreau.
Nothing.
I do agree with Boudreau. The coaches shouldn't be yelling at the players. And it happened similarly in Vancouver, actually, against Edmonton, where Edmonton's coaching staff was yapping at some of the Canucks, and Tortorella obviously didn't like that, so we started yapping at Edmonton. I agree with Boudreau. The coaches really have no business yelling at the players. They should just keep to themselves and stop that. But I understand what Waugh was doing. He wanted to make a statement. It was his first game. He wanted to show the city of Colorado that he meant business, that he was entertaining, and he was ready to be, as intense a coach as he was a player. But I do also agree that I don't think that's something you'll be seeing a lot more out of him. I know that the league fined him. Sakic, I'm sure, spoke to him. He's going to be intense, which there's nothing wrong with that. But he can't do that every game. I mean, he can't steal the show in that way. You can't have coaches yelling at the players. So I don't agree with what he did, but I did still find it entertaining as hell. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree completely. It was so spectacular. I believe in the philosophy that you protect your players, and I think part of it was just calling Boudreau out and saying, look, I'm not going to stand for that. And
it was a dirty hit, there's no doubt.
It's probably not going to happen again, also because other teams now know, Patrick's not going to stand up for this, and if we pull this shit, he's going to face that team again, the Ducks again, obviously, this season, and Colorado has their own fair share of physicality as well, so look for the next game to be look for that to become a really cool rivalry.
I think
a new one now that some teams have been moved around.
We'll talk about this more in the next show, obviously talking about the West, but I think Colorado might surprise some people this year. I don't know if they're necessarily a playoff lock, but I think they're going to do better this year than people think they will. I think they're a year older. A lot of the young guys are looking a lot more dangerous. McKinnon is just... I can't say enough good things. I can't say enough good things about him. He just looks amazing. The way he's playing right now, he's going to play himself onto the Olympic roster. I mean, he just looks so good.
Right?
Could you imagine?
Wouldn't that be spectacular? That'd be a new record. He already did make a record in the first night to be the first rookie to get 2 points in his opening debut since 1941, I believe it was.
Wow.
Yeah, so pretty epic record there, considering the names that have been around through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and such. Mm-hmm. Putting his name into the history books off the bat and showing us that he can play with that young roster. And hopefully Patrick Waugh is going to bring the energy that we saw from Game 1 all year.
Yeah, I think Waugh is going to have a very good time in Colorado. I think the fans I know the fans love him. I think he's going to do a lot for that team, and he's really going to bring them some success, which they deserve because they have a good team, and they just couldn't find it last year. I think McKinnon was a huge factor in them stepping their game up all of a sudden, just like Waugh. I cannot wait to see Waugh and Tortorella face off against each other.
Oh man, that's going to be epic.
That's going to be a ton of fun. It's looking to be a very entertaining year, man. I think this is going to be a great year for hockey. Obviously, the Olympics are going to add a lot to that as well. And yeah, man, I'm excited.
I want to give a props out to the Winnipeg Jets. Tonight, Solani playing his first game back in Winnipeg because he didn't get to during the lockout last year. So huge standing ovation and the first star for Solani. So congratulations to Teemu Solani, and it's just awesome to see that.
A class act,
in the world
man.
of hockey, that it's all fun and games when you're yelling and booing and screaming, and the best are still the best. And
one of the classiest guys in the
make
game.
What it is.
Yeah.
So it's great to see the fans acknowledge that. Just such a classy guy.
Oh, he's amazing. You cannot love Solani. He's just awesome. 43 years old, still doing it. He's terrific. I mean, I don't know anybody that could speak ill of Solani. He's just so good. And it was very heartwarming, you're right, to see the reaction he got from Winnipeg, the place that started it all for him. I mean, my earliest memories as a hockey fan, growing up as a Canucks fan, I think my first game that I could actually remember the details of was Solani's rookie season. Solani and Bure both playing their rookie seasons, and Solani scored 76 goals that year, which is the most any rookie has ever scored. I remember clearly the first game that I ever watched that I could still have memories of is the Canucks playing the Jets, and just seeing this crazy kid named the Finnish Flash just racing up and down the ice. And I was like, even at that age, I knew I was witnessing something special. And I mean, there's been very few players like Solani. I expect that there won't be very many more like him. He's a very unique package, and yeah, as you said, such a class act. Well, I think that's it, okay, bud?
All right. Anything else that you can think of off the top of your head? All I want to do is trash talk you about the pool, but right now you're kicking my butt, so I got nothing.
Yeah, me and Justin are in a hockey pool, and yeah, I think I'm like 3 points up. But it's a young season, my friend. 3 games in, lots will change. I just hope that Ovechkin has like a 900-point season this year, so I could bury you guys.
He just destroys it for you.
Yeah.
Excellent pickup for you, and
yeah, I'm glad.
Good luck to you the rest of the year.
I gotta say, I'm glad I picked the McKinnon too. By the way.
Yeah, I know you're looking strong, man. Fleury's going to get lots of wins, and it's scaring me. It's scaring me.
We'll see what happens, but yeah, that's our show, folks. We're going to have part 2 coming next Sunday to you. Once again, this is the Bandwagoners news and notes around the NHL. My name is Andy Cole,
and my name's Justin Boniface. Thanks for listening.
Have a good night.
The Mobcast Network.